Hello and welcome to Music is Medicine. My name is Matt Creedon. It's funny how life takes you in different directions. For quite a while now, I've been thinking about writing and recording a sitar album, not because I have some deep traditional connection to the instrument, but more because of curiosity. It really goes back to the Beatles, and hearing that sound for the first time, I remember thinking, what is that? It felt exotic, mysterious, and I suppose I always had it in the back of my mind that if the opportunity came along, I would get one, and well, eventually I did. Originally, my goal was simple. I wanted to be a guitarist in a band, but there were so many guitarists out there, and at some point I realized that if I wanted to stand out, I needed to write great songs. So that became my focus, songwriting, which then led to another reality in that I needed to make a living. And then the thing that kept showing up for me was teaching music. So I followed that. And the interesting thing is none of the other parts disappeared. I kept playing, writing, creating. The direction just shifted. And along the way, word got around that I played sitar, and one of my students' mothers connected me with a friend who ran a Bollywood dance troupe. And so suddenly I found myself playing festivals in the chill out area with a friend of mine, Kuljit, on tabla. Now, being a guitarist doesn't exactly make you an Indian classical sitarist. I could play some traditional melodies and improvise in my own Western way. And let's just say that there were definitely moments where Kuljit may have rolled his eyes. He's incredibly humble and forgiving, but I'm sure I made things interesting at times. Because the sitar is a deeply revered instrument in Indian culture, and me approaching it like a blues guitar could probably be seen as a little sacrilegious. But that's part of the reality. I didn't grow up in that tradition. It's not in my blood. The closest connection I have really is the Beatles. So I found myself in this strange in-between space, something I could do, but not something I felt completely authentic doing in a traditional sense, and that's where things began to shift. But alongside all of this, I've spent a lot of time in meditation and spiritual practice. You could say I've developed a strong connection to the muse. My day starts around about 3 a.m. I spend about an hour writing music, and then I move into meditation, Tibetan practices, qigong, yoga, even a bit of resistance training just to top it off. It takes me around about 4 hours before I even get to breakfast. It probably sounds a little bit insane, but honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way, because after doing this consistently, something starts to happen. You begin to feel very in touch with something deeper. You might call it presence or flow or just a quiet clarity. And if I'm being completely honest, it can actually begin to feel a bit like being high. Actually, it can make you feel very, very high. So we tend to think of those states as coming from outside, but the body already has everything it needs. It can heal and it can regulate itself, and it does have the capacity to generate some pretty profound internal states. So what I've really been doing for a long time now is learning how to work with my own nervous system. And the interesting thing is anyone can do it, just that the practice just speeds things up. So one morning at 3 a.m. I decided to run a bit of an experiment. I'd heard for years that this time of day was one of the easiest ways to access creativity, because the mind is quiet, the world hasn't quite woken up yet. And I thought, why not try it with the sitar? At the time, I'd already made the decision that if I was going to do this album, I needed to do it in a way that felt honest, not trying to replicate traditional Indian music, but allowing it to sound like me. And I think somewhere along the way, I realized something. The more I tried to sound like something I wasn't, the further away I got from the music. But the moment I let go of that and just allowed it to sound like me, that's when something opened up. Not just musically, but internally as well. It felt more honest, more connected. And interestingly, that's where creativity really started to flow. So instead of improvising endlessly, I focused on writing melodies, just simple, intentional, purposeful lines. For me, music needs to tell a story. Every note needs to go somewhere. And as I started recording these pieces, something interesting happened. They began to feel cinematic, less like performances and more like experiences. And that's really where the idea comes together as music, as medicine. Not in the literal sense, but as something that can shift your state. Because if this music came from that quiet creative space, then maybe it can take you there too. Almost like a kind of sonic exploration or a transmission from that 3 a.m. state. So what I see myself doing now is exploring that space and bringing something back from it and sharing it. This track is called Vesper, which means evening song. It felt fitting. The first piece I released is called Aurora, which means dawn, and now we're moving into the evening. I don't have a fixed plan for the album. I've written a lot of music and I'm simply making my way through it, letting it reveal itself. So without further ado, here is Vesper. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, remember, music is medicine.